Hey guys, and welcome to episode 4 of 3 Player Co-op. I'm Sean.
I'm Mark.
And I'm Mike.
Today we're going to talk about Day 1 downloadable content in light of the Mass Effect 3 From Ashes DLC, which will cost 800 points or $9.99 if you don't buy the collector's edition of the game. So what do we think?
I think this is a disgrace, personally. I'm not a fan of Day 1 DLC at all. I think it is a cheap way to screw your customers over for an extra $10 when you've already spent, say, $50 or $60 on the game new. I'm okay with Day 1 DLC only if it is free. A few years back, a friend of mine bought Dragon Age and started playing the game, really enjoyed it, met a guy at a campfire, and he started telling him a story about this amazing quest to go on, and then prompted him to buy the DLC.
I must confess, I thought the Dragon Age thing was kind of amusing. I mean, it was like, so you could help this person now. Give us $10.
Day 1 DLC is just never acceptable. I mean, as Mike said, you've already paid $40, $50, euros, yen. Well, no, actually, not yen. So anyways, you've already paid so much for the game already, and then they're making you fork out for another bit of content. And in the case of Mass Effect, you know, they usually add a fair bit of content and a fair bit of interesting stuff to the game itself. So it's one of those pieces that you feel, maybe I should get it just to expand the story somewhat and learn a bit more about the universe. The problem that I have in particular with Mass Effect is the game itself is already so long that there's no need to release it on day one. This is one of those games that people are going to labour over a little bit, play for an extended period of time, and they're not going to trade it in. They don't have anything to fear in the line of trade-ins, so I don't see why they just couldn't hold on to this content for another month and then release it down the line.
I'm okay with this particular Day 1 DLC. After all, it is a Collector's Edition exclusive item, and why not give non-Collector's Edition buyers immediate access to that particular piece of content?
Just to counter-argue this, I'm personally not a fan of collector's editions that include additional extras in the form of digital content. So for Deus Ex, they included a mission that was really terrible, to be honest. It was like the poorest mission in the whole game, and a bunch of extra guns. Or games that the collector's edition gets some extra weapons for an online mode. I don't think that's fair either. I've no problem with collector's edition offering extras. I buy a number of collector's editions personally. I got the Catherine collector's edition, which had a t-shirt and a pair of boxer shorts and a CD, which they're all fantastic. None of them mean that I get a better experience in the game than somebody who didn't buy the collector's edition.
Catherine appears to be the exception rather than the norm, because just about every collector's edition these days comes with DLC.
Okay, but you're taking this away from the original argument, which is why should Mass Effect 3 get Day 1 DLC? You know, they don't need this content. Like, an extra character is fair enough. They could have just put that in anyway, but this is an extra mission, and it's content that the game doesn't need with 40 hours of gameplay already in it. Simply put, Mass Effect 3 is going to be one of the biggest games of the year, both in terms of the fan base, sales, and the content in it. It just doesn't need Day 1 DLC.
This content is essentially just an extra, and it doesn't really take away from the game.
I'm also unhappy about the price of this DLC. The Stolen Memories DLC featuring Kasumi in Mass Effect 2 was 560 points. Arrival was 560 points. The difference was the Shadow Broker DLC, which was 800 points, if my memory serves me. But that was really substantial DLC. You know, you were learning more about a new character. You were learning more about an old character who you had previously worked with in the first game. So I felt that the 800 points was justified. What we're paying here is 800 points for a character who perhaps won't integrate into the story at all, and a mission that we don't really know much about.
For all we know, this could be as substantial as Lair of the Shadow Broker, which I think we're agreed is just amazing.
I agree. I think Lair of the Shadow Broker was some of the best DLC I've ever played. I'd put it up there alongside the DLC for Borderlands. I think there is almost no chance that this DLC will live up to Shadow Broker at all.
I'm going to take the cold capitalist view and say people should just vote with their wallets. If you like DLC, buy it. If you don't, just stay the hell away. So tell us what you think about Day 1 DLC and DLC in general in the comment section below.
Number 5!
Costume packs.
Number 4!
Resident Evil 5 multiplayer.
Number 3.
Tiger Woods courses.
Number 2.
The Dragon Age quest, Warden's Keep.
Number 1.
The winner is Horse Armor. This week saw talk of a Jet Set Radio re-release after Sega teased it on YouTube. The game originally came out on the ill-fated Dreamcast in 2000.
There will be no talking about the Dreamcast in a negative manner. The Dreamcast was one of the greatest consoles that was ever made. It was so underappreciated. I am really looking forward to the re-release of Jet Set Radio, or Jet Grind Radio, to our friends in the US. It was a fantastic game on the Dreamcast. So unique, so fresh, and had a really great soundtrack as well. So this just seems like a perfect re-release. If they treat it properly and maybe up the resolution on the graffiti, for example, or a couple of key assets, this game could really, really shine. And it would look particularly good with its cell shading and the amazing color palette.
Devil's Advocate.
I read an interesting article recently that talked about how nostalgia should be left in the past and we should just celebrate today's releases. So do you think they can do it justice, or should it be one of those games that will come out and won't live up to what you remember?
With movies, there are so many different ways that you can enjoy something from the past. If you don't own a Dreamcast, there's no way for you to play Jet Set Radio. This is a way to bring the game to more people. I can't see any negative aspect to that.
I agree with Mike. I think HD re-releases are a great thing, and I hope they continue. I, for instance, got the Metal Gear Solid collection from the States. That's how strongly I felt about it. And I downloaded the Resident Evil 4 HD re-release on the day it came out, even though it was ridiculously expensive.
I've been very positive about HD re-releases so far in this conversation. To be honest, it's not all sunshine and roses for me. So I was a big fan of the Dreamcast, as I've already mentioned, and I downloaded Sonic Adventure. I did not, however, download Crazy Taxi. I spent, I would say, upwards of 40 hours playing that game whenever it originally came out. And there's not a lot to it, so that should explain, or should give an example of how into the game I was. The problem with the re-release is they did not relicense the original soundtrack. And for those who don't know, it featured 7 or 8 songs exclusively by Bad Religion and The Offspring. That was it. They were the only 2 bands that were featured. But I know the songs inside and out because they were played in that game. The re-release does not have these songs, so it did not get my money.
It really is an interesting sign of the times. I mean, I downloaded Sensible Soccer as soon as it came out on Xbox. And one of the funny things I noticed is that instead of playing with like gigs and skulls, you had gags and scholars and things like that. So it's interesting to see how licensing has changed over time. I downloaded the Monkey Island games and really enjoyed them, but I actually played them in the pixelated versions just because it felt more realistic, it felt more real, and it felt a bit like what I used to play. So I really enjoyed that side of things. So it's not even HD re-releases I like, it's just, as you said, the ability to play these games on new consoles and new updates.
I think the Monkey Island point is a great one, and it demonstrates 2 different schools of thought with regard to re-releasing or remaking a game. So on one side you have the re-release brigade who throw out a game, barely update the textures, and sell it for $20. On the other side you have the likes of LucasArts, who remade The Secret of Monkey Island and the sequel, LeChuck's Revenge. I mean, they really put a lot of effort in to make these games as good as they possibly could be. Also, with the remakes, you have the remake of Resident Evil 1, which I think is probably one of the best games I've ever played. And the original Resident Evil was great, but this heightened everything. And I think it was a really great example of a way to treat a game with respect.
I cannot ignore a point about Resident Evil and not jump in. I agree completely. I think the Resident Evil remake was amazing. It is the ultimate expression of the classic Resident Evil formula, and I very much doubt it'll be matched ever.
Also, another aspect to HD re-releases that I don't like is the question of whether something is value for money or not. So, back to the Dreamcast, my favorite console, I played Code Veronica and loved it. I would say it's one of my favorite Resident Evil games, but Capcom charged 1,600 Microsoft points or $20 for the game, and there's no way that a game that's that old justifies this price tag. I also thought that was too much for Resident Evil 4, so I didn't buy that either.
We do not speak ill of Resident Evil 4. No matter what, it is amazing.
Sean, thanks a lot for making that point, because you are the exact reason that Capcom feel they can release 15 different versions of this game and charge close to full price every single time.
I am a sucker. What can I say? Another example of a re-release that treated the original version with reverence was the Halo Combat Evolved re-release, in which you could use the original graphics with the touch of a button. It essentially includes the original with the re-release. That's great value. Thanks very much for watching, and here are some of your comments from last week.